history lessons in high school accurately depicted both European and Indigenous views?
No.
Yes, maybe. I don't know. I don't feel like I have enough information on the topic to accurately say whether or not it was accurate, if that makes any sense.
No, I don't think so.
Yes.
No, no, definitely not.
From what you know, could you give me a brief explanation of Canadian history?
So it was colonized during the later end of the Middle Ages, I think like just before the Industrial Revolution, after the Agricultural Revolution, sometime in between there. Like, oh, that's the Canada. And then it was settled from east to west eventually, and then there's a few wars in between. But outside of that, I don't know that much.
Colonization and a lot of taking over, and then it just formed. Like there was lots of good land to farm. I think it was mainly lots of resources, so they just took over it.
Okay.
What I know is that I believe it was in the 1500s was when Canada was first began to be colonized. And it was colonized by the British and the French. And they essentially divided and conquered and slowly spread west because they landed on the east coast. And then essentially took over and segregated specific groups of Indigenous/First Nations people and took control over them. And then somewhere down the line they decided to become an independent nation, not so much a colony, and they confederated. They were still under British rule, but it was still like a very loose British rule. And as far as I know, that's a rough summary.
What do you know about the history before the colonial settlers came?
Honestly, not much. Like in regards to First Nations people, I know that there were a lot of different tribes, but in terms of differentiating them, I don't know a whole lot.
Nothing, actually.
Not very much. Like I guess in high school we were taught a little bit of culture and like how it was, but not really like history, I guess.
There's a lot of Indigenous stuff.
Virtually nothing.
Did you know, at contact with Europeans, each of the hundreds of Indigenous peoples of America possessed all of the elements of nationhood that were well established by European settlers: territory, governing structures, legal systems, and historical continuity with their territories.
Why do you think history in high school was taught to you in the way that it was?
Our school was predominantly white, and our town was predominantly white, and I think that talking about some of these issues is controversial and people don't like hearing it, and so teachers either they don't know or they just tend to shy away from it because of that.
I think it's really government dictated what we learn in grade 12 high school for sure.
Okay.
Basically, it just covered the bare minimum what the curriculum said had to be covered.
Did you know, in addition to Aboriginal content not being taught in schools, facts about the pre-colonial history are not easily accessible on the internet?
Alright, today we're going to talk about the history of Canada, and we're going to start with John Cabot, who first discovered Canada.
Wait, weren't there people here in Canada before? Shouldn't we start with them first?
Well, yes, there were, but we didn't become a nation until Europeans discovered Canada. There really isn't much information in here about how they lived before. However, we will discuss later on in the course a little bit of what they were like.
Well, why not? Weren't they an important part of our history?
Yeah, why are we only learning one side of the story? Isn't it important for us to know all sides of our history?
Yeah, shouldn't we have an idea about how they lived before Europeans came? Did they have a government? How did they survive? What were their stories?
None of that is relevant to the content of this course. Canadian history began when the European settlers arrived. The textbook does give a brief explanation of all those things. Because Europeans documented enough, we know some of that information on how Indigenous people lived.
So nothing important happened before the settlers came?
Ugh, that can't be true.
The only thing that you have to worry about is what is written in that history textbook in front of you. Everything that is in this textbook is absolute fact.
No, it's not. History is written by the victors. So it doesn't talk about the faults, flaws, and bad decisions they don't want recognized.
History textbooks are neutral. The story is told from both sides. I agree with our teacher. Why are we arguing what our textbooks are telling us?
Thank you. And to add on to your point, Europeans came in with nothing but peaceful intentions.
Did you know the Beothuk were one of the original people of what is now the island of Newfoundland? Encounters in close proximity with European settlers caused many of the Beothuk to die of starvation due to the Europeans overhunting, as well as diseases introduced that the Beothuk had no natural immunity to. The Europeans engaged in violent disputes with the Beothuk over land, which led to several deaths. Some of the Beothuk were hunted down and killed simply because they were Beothuk. By 1829, the last person recognized by the Europeans as Shauna Deet Deet died in St. John's. Their language and culture became extinct.
But were Aboriginal people killed through your peaceful intentions?
Yes, people were killed, but only people who engaged with war with the Europeans.
But why would they start fighting with the Europeans?
Well, they didn't realize we were trying to civilize them. They didn't want to become like us, and they wanted to continue with their problematic and unadvanced ways. They weren't very technologically advanced, so we had to introduce a lot to them, such as guns and clothing garments. We also introduced suitable housing, metal tools, and modern medicine. And even though we tried to help them become more civilized, they were very aggressive towards us.
Okay, wait, didn't the Europeans bring bad things over too, like alcohol and diseases like smallpox? Did you know blankets infected with the deadly smallpox virus were traded to the indigenous people by military leaders such as Lord J. Ray Amherst?
Isn't what the Europeans did called forced acculturation?
Well, it's actually called colonialism. If you look into your text, turn to page 54. And Ricky, would you please read the definition of colonialism for me?
The control and exploitation of a territory through settlement. But we were actually just trying to be helpful, right? Like we were just trying to make them have a better, more comfortable life. And we had to take over politically in order to make these accomplishments.
Yes, that's exactly it.
But what you described is acculturation, the change in people's culture by a dominant culture by way of military and political conquest.
That may be, but that's how colonialism works. That is the way a great country was founded.
Isn't that a problematic view to have?
Yeah, how can you just accept that?
Okay, I think we've all made some good points here today, but we've gone quite off topic. Let's turn to chapter 9. And can anyone tell me who the first Canadian Prime Minister was? Yep,
Sir John A. Macdonald.
correct. First Nation students are unlikely to identify with a curriculum that begins with the exclusion and massacre of their peoples, and that continues to treat them as little more than the scenery or as disruptors of the inevitable national progress. In public schools today, it is normal that our history courses ignore Aboriginal interpretations of Canada's history.
The story of Canada was written through the white male's perspective. The truth behind the treatment of Aboriginal peoples and the colonialism they were faced with is minimized, ignored, or disregarded altogether in our history lessons. It is important to teach that Canada is not as innocent and fair as we have originally been taught in our schools.
We need to include meaningful curricula into our history lessons, which includes Aboriginal content. This means going beneath the surface and really understanding their ways of knowing, learning, and how they functioned as a society before white settlers came. It is important to learn the true history of Canada and not just through the point of view of the white male settler.
Despite white fragility, it is critical to resist resentment towards Aboriginal content in our history lessons. We need to have courageous conversations on the truth behind Canada's history, regardless of whether or not it makes us uncomfortable.